This is Pleiku, 250 miles north of Saigon, the air base that was ripped by Vietnamese communist guerrillas. 8 Americans died in the attack that brought swift retaliation by U.S. and South Vietnamese forces. From carriers and land bases, 49 jets struck back at staging areas just across the border in North Vietnam. The Red Guerrillas were able to slip by Vietnamese guards in the middle of the night raid and lob mortar shells into the area, while hand-carried bombs were placed under aircraft and against barrack walls. Why security was so lax is the object of 2 investigations, although some officers say full protection against such attacks is impossible in this jungle war. There is mute evidence of the toll the guerrillas took here. First official word of the retaliatory attacks comes from Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in a briefing for newsmen. The map shows the relative position of 3 carriers attached to the 7th Fleet, as well as the 3 U.S. bases that were hit by the Viet Cong. This is what followed.
Immediately following the attack, U.S. representatives in Saigon met with representatives of the South Vietnamese government. They jointly agreed that joint retaliatory action was required. The President's approval of this action was given after the action was discussed with and recommended by the National Security Council at a meeting held between 7:45 p.m. and 9 p.m. last night.
Mr. McNamara said that the raiding U.S. jets hit Dong Hoi Barracks, where most Red troops are equipped for their forays to the south. In the first raid, land-based planes were forced back by the weather, but the carrier jets completed their strike with the loss of 1 American plane. Later, photo reconnaissance flights proved that much of the staging area had been completely destroyed. The confrontation between the Reds and the West was the most critical since the Gulf of Tonkin incident last summer, when the U.S. replied just as swiftly to North Vietnam PT boat attacks. The second raid came the next day, when South Vietnamese pilots struck anew at bases across the border. Here again, a successful mission was carried out as the Red Communications Center at Vinh Linh was bombed and strafed. Both Beiping and Moscow were slow to comment on these retaliatory raids. Finally, they both promised to back the North Vietnamese regime. Asian reaction, however, was that the 2 Red powers had lost face in the East-West showdown. To bolster defenses in South Vietnam, a Hawk ground-to-air missile unit has gone on duty. Meanwhile, President Johnson's Special Assistant for Security Affairs, McGeorge Bundy, arrives at the scene of the Viet Cong raid. He was in Vietnam on a mission for the president when the attacks took place, and he holds a battlefront conference with Lieutenant General Con before returning to Washington. While he conferred with Vietnamese officials, the National Security Council was meeting in Washington. It was these meetings that brought the swift decision to strike back at the Viet Cong, to re-emphasize our resolve to continue to defend the cause of freedom in Southeast Asia. Before leaving for home, Mr. Bundy flew to the 8th Field Hospital to visit the men wounded in the guerrilla attack. 108 men were wounded, 79 of them seriously. Mr. Bundy was to say later that he found morale high among the men, a factor that the president says our enemies always underestimate. Mr. Bundy arrives back in Washington the next day, and he immediately goes into conference with the president and the Security Council. He tells reporters that he found political and religious factions in Vietnam united in their belief that the Viet Cong is their common enemy.
We had an opportunity to talk frankly and freely with them. They again emphasized the overriding importance in South Vietnam of the contest against the communists. They emphasized, as the political leaders had done, the importance and their own dedication to, the importance of and their dedication to the task of forming a stable and effective political society under a stable and effective government in that country, a view which, of course, we share. And I think it's fair to say that the Americans in Vietnam are in very good heart and are prepared to continue even against this kind of danger and this kind of sneak attack. Let me say one more thing about that sneak attack, that in a war of this kind in which there are no fixed lines, in which there are large territories that are lightly inhabited and that are essentially jungle and mountainous in character. I know no military man who believes that without an overwhelming assignment of local defense forces, it is possible to guarantee against this kind of sneak attack. This is the sort of thing, and all Americans in the area know it, with which we simply have to contend while we prosecute in company with the government and people of South Vietnam a contest against communism, which is of the highest importance to our national interest.
Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara points to bombed-out supply routes from North Vietnam, routes that have supplied Reds in the South with weapons, like this Chinese machine gun, as well as troops trained by the communists. Discounting the possibility of using nuclear weapons, Mr. McNamara says that our air raids have knocked out 24 key bridges. He says these strikes will continue because intelligence reports have confirmed that regular North Vietnam Army troops have infiltrated the South. He specified men of the 325th Division.
I can't be too specific or accurate in estimating the size of that battalion. I would guess it's on the order of 400 or 500 men. As to its significance, I think it's primarily significant in indicating that the North Vietnamese have used up or dried up the source of individual fillers who could be recruited, trained, and sent back to fight in South Vietnam, and that they're now having to call upon the regular units of their forces for that purpose. And this is understandable. I believe I'm correct in saying that in the past 4.5 years, the Viet Cong, the communists, have lost 89,000 men killed in South Vietnam. Now, not all of these men have been infiltrated from the north, but an important number have been. And with that, plus the expansion of the Viet Cong forces in the south, you can see the heavy drain upon the filler resources of the north, and the reason why they are having to turn to their regular military units to continue the supply of men over these infiltration routes, a supply that's absolutely essential to them if they are to offset the continuing casualties.
A three-man junta has been named to rule the Dominican Republic as a rebel movement collapses. It was an attempt to reinstate exile President Juan Bosch, and U.S. Marines were ordered into the country to protect American lives. The Leathernecks were airlifted to the capital of Santo Domingo, where they killed 2 snipers who attacked the U.S. Embassy. President Johnson ordered the troop movement when it appeared doubtful that a stable government could be established immediately. The rebels claimed rule of the country, but their regime collapsed when neutral naval and army units joined government forces led by General Wesson. He was the leader of the rebellion in 1963 that ousted President Bosch on charges that he was pro-Castro. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marines have also taken center stage in South Vietnam. No longer a defensive force at the Da Nang Air Base, they have been ordered to fan out on a wide perimeter to flush out rebel Viet Cong positions. On land and afloat, they patrol around the clock, and for the time being at least, these forays seem to have put an end to communist night raids on the strategic air base. The Marine forces are mobile and can be moved quickly to any point that calls for emergency action. An alarm to strengthen a remote outpost brings Marines on the double. They are ready with speed and dispatch. In Santo Domingo and in Da Nang, the Marines uphold their great tradition. The President reaffirms United States policy in South Vietnam in a talk to the Association of American Cartoonists. These social satirists hear Mr. Johnson describe Red China as a hungry tiger ready to devour all of Asia, using North Vietnam as a cat's paw.
Their target is not merely South Vietnam. It is Asia. Their objective is not the fulfillment of Vietnamese nationalism. It is to erode and to discredit America's ability to help prevent Chinese domination over all of Asia. In this domination, they shall never succeed. And I am continuing and I am increasing the search for every possible path to peace.
The president visualizes a peaceful, prosperous Vietnam once the fighting can be brought to an end at the conference table. He outlined past aid to South Vietnam since it became independent in 1954 and extended a hand to the communist North to partake of the fruits of what could be peaceful progress with a billion-dollar assistance program. He called on the Soviet Union to join with other industrial nations to assure Vietnam's progress. Our efforts in war or peace will continue, he said, and he looked toward tomorrow.
It will be there when peace comes to us, and so will we. Not with soldiers and planes, not with bombs and bullets, but with all the wondrous weapons of peace in the 20th century. And then perhaps together, all of the people in the world can share that gracious task with all the people of Vietnam, North and South alike.
The mighty aircraft carrier Enterprise becomes the first nuclear-powered ship ever to enter combat. Off the coast of Vietnam, the Big E launches her Phantom jets against Viet Cong hideouts. 4 planes can be catapulted from the Enterprise at one time, giving her a striking power unequaled by any other carrier afloat. Although the pilots and crewmen saw no enemy aircraft, they knew they were in the war. 2 planes were lost, but their crews were rescued. Meanwhile, on the ground, small search and kill missions have been increased. Mobile units penetrate to Viet Cong pockets to flush out the enemy and force him into face-to-face combat. There is the constant menace of an ambush as they move down roads and trails controlled by the guerrillas. Then the expected happens. The Americans and South Vietnamese are pinned down by enemy fire. The Viet Cong are routed for the moment, and medical corpsmen turn to the wounded. While official word gives casualties as moderate, there is no such qualification on the battlefield itself. This is the blood and suffering of war. A minor skirmish, but to these soldiers, the most important day in their lives. They had come through alive. A 4,000-mile pilgrimage nears its end. Accompanied only by her faithful donkey, Madame Genevieve Trosniewski arrives in Jerusalem after walking most of the way from Le Havre, France. When her youngest child lay seriously ill, Madame Trosniewski made a vow to walk to the Holy Land to give thanks if the child recovered. No sooner had this come about than she immediately set out on her long pilgrimage. Near the end of the journey, her donkey, Bijou, had to retire from exhaustion. But with Bijou II, she kept on, her only aim to fulfill her vow. Madame Trosniewski visits the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the site of the Annunciation for her prayers of thanksgiving. During her long, long walk, she wore out 10 pairs of shoes, but she had her great courage to spur her on. A remarkable saga. The story of one woman's act of faith. One way to go on the record with your new collection is to do as Angela of London does. Have the model step out to the pop beat. It's not the temperature, it's the tempo that's hot. To get with it, says Angela, your hat must be in tune with the rest of your costume. A silver lame jacket, a hit of the show here in Manchester. For a matter of fact, it puts everything in focus. Optical art has spread to the jackets, topping bell-bottom slacks. No need to pity the poor sailor on a night out with these. The net result of Angela's way out look is to capture attention. So keep a stiff upper lip, men, and wait for spring. Meanwhile, in Paris, the eyes have it. The designers say it's about time someone did something about sunglasses. So now you can have a matched costume from toe to eye. When glasses like these begin to show up on the beaches this winter, we can just hear Aunt Matilda say, those girls are making spectacles of themselves. The New York Jets meet the Chargers at San Diego, and the home team takes charge right away. Keith Lincoln goes to the 1-foot line as the quarter ends, and then opens the second period by going over for San Diego. The Jets have not won on 5 previous appearances here, and today they can't cope with the Charger combination of John Hadle and Lance Elworth. This gain leads to another San Diego touchdown. Hadle to Lincoln, 25 yards for Lincoln's second touchdown. Jet quarterback Joe Namath has 3 passes intercepted. This one snagged by Kenny Graham is a killer. He runs it back 50 yards for still another San Diego score. The Jets are fizzling out. The New Yorkers come alive momentarily in the third quarter. Namath to Bill Mathis begins an 82-yard drive. Namath to Bake Turner for 11. Namath, playing his first season, handles himself like an old pro. But even this classic touchdown pass to Don Maynard does nothing more than prevent a shutout. The Jets are chased out of town, 38-7. Operation Pershing on the Bang Son Plain in South Vietnam. A major offensive drive by U.S. 1st Cavalry soldiers determined to seek, find, and rout a huge Viet Cong force from the area. A small village gives up enemy suspects who use grenades, automatic weapons, and landmines to slow the advance of American cavalrymen. Unfortunately, peasant villagers were caught between the retreating guerrillas and the oncoming U.S. forces. As a necessary precaution, the village is put to the torch so that it cannot be used again in the future as a base of operations for the VC. Many of these rural settlements have been bought, cowed, or persuaded to give aid and comfort to guerrilla groups. Residents here will be relocated in a new area. Victory is tempered with mercy for the civilians. A U.S. field hospital gives treatment to several women and children, tragic figures trapped by war. At the White House, a vital piece of legislation reaches President Johnson's desk. It's the 25th constitutional amendment, providing for the replacement of any disabled president or the filling of any vice presidential vacancy. The president points out that 16 times the U.S. has been without a vice president. The yacht Phoenix, a self-ordained mercy ship manned by a crew of 7 determined American pacifists. Its mission, to bring medical supplies to the North Vietnamese port of Hai Phong, despite Red Cross warnings and without State Department clearance. Sailing from Japan, The Quaker-sponsored group may be intercepted at sea by the 7th Fleet ships, preventing them from reaching heavily bombed Tonkin Gulf. These are the finalists in the first international paper airplane contest, which drew 11,000 entries from 49 states and 26 foreign countries. The competition is comprised of 4 divisions: duration aloft, distance flown, aerobatics, and origami, the Japanese art of paper folding. The stunt flying wasn't exactly breathtaking. The distance winner takes the prize with a non-scheduled flight of 91 feet. Trophies were called Leonardo's after Da Vinci, the patron saint of paper airplanes, said the sponsors. A rectangular flying wing remains aloft longest, over 10 seconds. Paper airplanes out of the schoolroom find fame in this frivolous fly-off. The House of Christian Dior prepares to show its summer line of millinery. Inspiration is drawn from the mystery and allure of Africa. This rustic straw is called tribal topknots. In step with current kaftan and boo-boo dress fashions is this descendant of the planter's hat. A ruched hat called rain turban will make you the most chic lady on safari in the wilds of the city. African Queen, one of a set of 8, uses the pinks and golds of a sunrise on the dark continent to form a halo of light around the wearer. Piquant, yet primitive. Another African Queen. Fabrics range from straws to silks, with stitchings based on African designs. Tropical chapeau for jungle or patio male hunting. First Canadian Winter Games at Quebec City, patterned as a minor Olympics with entries from all provinces. Pair dance winners Maureen Peever and Wayne Palmer of Ontario. Miss Kathy Lee Irving, also from Ontario, takes the gold medal in Class A solo figure skating with this dazzling exhibition of freestyle skating. The province of Quebec comes up with a winner in Toller Cranston, gold medalist in the men's division. But Ontario is the overall winner with British Columbia second and Alberta third. Winter Games in a winter wonderland. The third international winter motocross race gets off to a roaring start at Vimperk, Czechoslovakia. The tricky and dangerous course presents a real challenge to the top riders in Europe. Elimination heats weeded out the field, and only the best cyclists have made the finals. It's high-speed punishment for both man and machine. Snow, mud, and some axle-busting bumps combine to make it rugged going for these cycle jockeys. The finish line's in sight, and that checkered flag looks like home sweet home. No wonder the winner is a native Czech. Fellow Czech mates take second and third spots too. Next event, a speedy trip to a nice hot shower.
Damaged planes at Da Nang Air Base are one result of a long-range rocket shelling attack by Viet Cong, which also destroyed several military buildings. A powerful new Russian-made weapon is blamed. 200 homes in a village nearby were leveled as the VC used the heaviest and most powerful ground weapons of the war so far. The attack came from about 135 rocket launching positions, some of them as far away as 7 miles. Experts say Soviet-made 140-millimeter rockets of great range and bursting power inflicted the damage. Following in the wake of the blasting, shock, grief, and the realization of death. 47 were killed, more than 100 wounded. Conventional mortars were also used in the pre-dawn bombing, but the long-range rockets were responsible for the high death toll. While survivors mourn the victims, steps are being taken to prevent similar attacks.
Spring at home, but unmindful of clock or calendar, the Vietnam struggle goes on. A Viet Cong ambush of a U.S. Marine Rough Rider truck convoy kills one American Leatherneck, wounding 4 others. Many vehicles were damaged, 2 destroyed. Elsewhere, South Vietnamese and American troops keep supply lines open while attacking a huge Viet Cong installation. The enemy camp was first pounded by heavy fire from ships and landing boats, providing cover for the assault wave foot soldiers. When the smoke clears, the inevitable roundup of prisoners, many of them seriously wounded. Among the captured, a large group of women, traditionally used by the enemy as ammunition bearers, village infiltrators, and informers. At least 18 VC soldiers were killed in this joint Allied sweep. Battle-weary feet, a soldier's nemesis. The brief pause allows communication with the ever-present field choppers, which pick up both Allied wounded and the captured enemy. Spring at home, but in Vietnam, a war that knows no swallowing. Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marchers include students, housewives, beatnik poets, doctors, businessmen, teachers, priests, and nuns. Makeup and costumes were bizarre. Before the parade, mass draft card burning was urged. Demonstrators claimed 200 cards were burned, but no accurate count could be determined. Reporters and onlookers were jostled away on purpose. Although mostly peaceful, shouted confrontations were frequent and fiery during the course of the march. The anti-war marchers were picketed by anti-war marchers who were hawkish toward the parading doves. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King leads the procession to the United Nations, where he urges UN pressure to force the U.S. to stop bombing North Vietnam. Police arrested 5 persons as disorderly. 3 were grabbed when they rushed the parade float. No serious injuries, however, in New York's biggest anti-war march. A companion peace demonstration brings out 50,000 marchers in downtown San Francisco. They parade 2 miles along Market Street, pacifists and hippies together. Gigantic Kezar Stadium holds the mass rally, where anti-war songs and speeches trigger a short scuffle between pro and con factions. No one was injured. Both demonstrations were sponsored by a loose coalition of left-wing, pacifist, and moderate anti-war groups. President Johnson, meanwhile, let it be known that the FBI is closely watching all anti-war activity. In Rome, a peace demonstration ironically erupts into violence near the U.S. Embassy along the glamorous Via Veneto. Police, alerted to possible trouble, stopped the marchers just short of their goal, and then the march turned into a riot. Peace placards, cafe chairs, and fists flew in all directions. The next phase, a sit-down protest, but Rome police and firemen too had a solution. The solution, H2O, applied freely and under high pressure by the Rome Fire Brigade. The strong water jets bowled over demonstrators one after another. They dried out in the pokey. It took police 1 hour to break up the mob. 33 rioters were arrested. Internal drama in the eternal city. In this age of protest, one of the most recent finds 4,000 Londoners decrying British support for U.S. action in Vietnam. There were a few minor scuffles, but no arrests. The demonstrators were stopped from approaching Prime Minister Wilson's Downing Street home. Organized by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, mimics of Queen Elizabeth presented mock medals and said the war was a wicked obscenity. Madrid University, scene of the largest anti-American rally in recent years. Posters, leaflets, slogans, and student speeches all carried a vehemence seldom seen here before. Some 3,000 undergraduates attended. An American flag is burned at the height of the demonstration. Both President Johnson and Francisco Franco were vilified. A new low in public protest, added strain on Spanish-American relations. Over 4,000 anti-hate people jammed Detroit's Belle Isle Park in another example of the recent social phenomenon that's sweeping the country. It's a giant love-in, close relative to the be-in. Sort of a happy happening laced with the rites of spring. Slogans were just as frank as ever. Hippies, would-be hippies, and just plain folks made a colorful scene with wild costumes, uninhibited dancing, and general high frolic. Group therapy like this outdrew the Detroit Tigers that day. The end, man. Official U.S. Navy films show our jet fighter bombers plastering North Vietnam communication and boat repair facilities. Bridges, bypasses, and storage areas were also blasted by Skyhawk and Phantom jets from the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. Peking claimed the raids, quote, blatantly intruded into Chinese airspace. Our pilots hit only military targets. Air Force jets struck close to Hanoi once again, and the ground war moved to within 10 miles of the North Vietnam border. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers swing through Red Square in the annual May Day parade under a bright sunny sky. The 3-hour march draws red leaders and huge crowds of citizens. No new weapons are displayed in the procession on this traditional Russian labor holiday. Premier Kosygin's wife died while he reviewed the military might of his nation. In speeches, Kremlin leaders accused the U.S. of criminal war in Vietnam. Red Chinese diplomats walked out during criticism of Peking, pushing their way through crowds near the Lenin tomb. May Day in Moscow. Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest. For the most part orderly, minor scuffles did occur between the demonstrators and hecklers. A 3-hour parade takes the demonstrators across the Potomac on their way to the Pentagon. The crowd, estimated at about 50,000 persons, was a loose confederation of some 150 groups and included adults, students, even children. It is at the Pentagon where the first test of strength comes. Military police contain the crowd, but clashes soon break out. Federal marshals arrest several who attempt to break through the protective line. Reinforcing the marshals, a second wave of MPs with fixed bayonets in scabbards move into position. Some 400 demonstrators are arrested, 2 soldiers are injured, and tear gas is used. 6 break into a Pentagon side door, but are quickly apprehended in the day-long disturbance. The next day, campfires are lighted to hold off the autumn chill. The same weekend saw nationwide demonstrations supporting American GIs in Vietnam. The Pentagon protest was less violent in its second day of sitting in. The 2-day protest ends with over 600 arrested and the widespread opinion that the demonstration made everyone a loser. A new turbojet transport plane on display in Bremen. It will carry 65 passengers and was manufactured jointly by Germany, Holland, and England. One town's answer to the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. It's a Support Our Men in Vietnam rally organized by high school senior Paul Christopher and it draws 25,000 people. Christopher said he was happy with the turnout, which almost equaled the town's total population. He urged more such demonstrations by youth throughout the nation, and the crowd roared its approval with some vigorous flag waving.